Imagine this. You pay dues for neighborhood harmony. And then, your HOA calls the cops on your family vineyard at sunrise. What would you do if Karen tried to bulldoze your livelihood over a petty grudge? Dawn rolled over Solstice Valley like a soft blanket. The fog hanging low between neat rows of grapevines. I was out there with my pruning shears right around 5 in the morning. Boots dark with dew. When the sirens cut through the quiet like a bad memory, radios crackled. 2 officers stepped onto the gravel lane. And right behind them strutted the HOA president, Karen Hartwell, smug as a cat that swallowed the canary. Phone out. Recording. Like she was filming the grand finale of her own reality show. Her perfume fought with the earthy smell of wet soil. Her smile said, "Gotcha." My name's Mark Thornfield. 3 years back, I was a corporate attorney in San Francisco. Billing, $400. Sorry. $400 an hour. Living on room service and conference calls. Then my marriage collapsed like a card table. My ex found comfort with my law partner. And the divorce burned through my savings faster than you can say alimony. I landed here, in my late grandfather's 40-acre place in Solstice Valley. An honest patch of vines carved into hills that used to be nothing but farms and people who minded their own business. The farmhouse groans when the wind pushes it, and the porch boards creak like old knees. My German Shepherd, Barley, treats delivery trucks like a personal insult. But after years of corporate backstabbing, waking up to grape leaves shining under first light felt healing. The vineyard needed love irrigation from the Carter era. Tractors older than disco, but it was our legacy. My grandfather's hands planted these vines back in 1962, and I wasn't about to be the generation that let them die. Enter Karen. Picture every HOA cliché rolled into one pearls. Power suit. The smile of a school principal who enjoys sending kids to detention. Her husband, Preston Hartwell, is a developer who builds beige palaces that all look like they were copy-pasted. Karen drives a white SUV that's never touched a dirt road. Not even by accident. The trouble started over a fence. I was replacing worn boards along the property line. Basic farm work to keep deer out and tipsy wedding guests in, when Karen click-clacked across the gravel in heels built for boardrooms. Not fields. Clipboard. Sunglasses. A tiny pin that said "Community First." "That fencing violates our aesthetic standards," she announced. "This is agricultural land," I said, leaning on the post-hole digger. "My family's been here for, 6 decades. Your HOA's been here, 3 years. She blinked at the word agricultural like I'd spoken ancient Greek. "We are a residential neighborhood now. There are standards. Mark." 2 days later, I got a certified letter thick enough to stop a door. Cease and desist. Fines threatened. Accusations that my winery violated residential zoning. Karen had copied the county inspector, my bank, and the local newspaper. It wasn't a complaint, it was a coordinated strike. Thing is, I'm not just a farmer. I'm a former real estate lawyer. And when someone tries to bury you in paperwork, you bury them back. Just deeper. I dug out my grandfather's file boxes from the pantry. The cardboard soft with age. In a folder labeled "Important, Keep Forever." I found the golden ticket, the original 1962 deed, complete with an agricultural exemption and what's called perpetual farming rights. In plain talk, our right to farm predated any HOA and trumped their glossy binders. I drafted a response that could make a law professor dab a proud tear copies of the deed. The exemption. A polite request for the county to confirm our status. I sent it to everyone Karen had copied. Plus the newspaper editor, who probably expected gossip and got a legal seminar. When the county inspector showed, he looked genuinely sorry to be there. Routine, he said. Clipboard ready? Anonymous tip about unpermitted structures. Anonymous. Uh-huh. He spent hours walking the property. The barn from 1965 grandfathered. The equipment shed built in the late 90s permitted. Even the old root cellar passed. By sundown, he signed the form and said, "Your agricultural exemption is ironclad. Whoever filed that complaint doesn't understand rural law." Did she understood pressure? She understood intimidation. She did not understand the kind of stubborn you find in families who coax fruit from dirt. Season after season. A week later, an emergency HOA board meeting popped up. Community beautification standards addressing agricultural eyesores. Subtle as a brick through a window. I decided to attend. The community center smelled like coffee and carpet cleaner. 30 or so neighbors sat in folding chairs. Half of them looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Karen took the front table like she was chairing a Senate hearing. PowerPoint. Talking points. Protecting property values. Maintaining neighborhood character. And then the petition signatures from concerned homeowners who feared my commercial operation. But Solstice Valley isn't only cul-de-sacs. 3 long-timers stood and spoke. "Mark's family has been here longer than all of us," said Mrs. Patterson, a retired teacher with a spine of steel. "The Vineyard is the reason we wanted to live near open land, not because of it." For a half second, I saw panic crack Karen's perfect mask. Then, she gestured to a man with an expensive briefcase. "Lawyer. Billing by the minute." The message was clear. We're not done. Neither was I. If you can't beat a farmer in court, you try to crush him in the court of public opinion. Karen launched a Facebook group, Concerned Neighbors of Solstice Valley, and posted photos that made my tractor look like a siege engine from a post-apocalyptic movie. "Has anyone noticed delivery trucks speeding? Are there more flies now?" The comments snowballed. Lies travel faster than truth, especially when property values get whispered like a prayer. The hit spread. Folks who once waved now looked past me. At the hardware store, Bill, who'd chat about baseball forever, went colder than a January pond. At the bank, the loan officer smiled like a mannequin and suddenly needed more documentation. So I dug. Late nights. County records. Old maps. Coffee that could dissolve a spoon. What I found made me laugh, the kind of laugh you do alone in a quiet kitchen when the puzzle pieces click. My land extended 50 feet farther east than I thought, right through the back edge of 3 HOA backyards. My grandfather had granted temporary construction easements decades ago, but he never sold the dirt. Classic farmer, move rent the right. Keep the land. And tucked deeper in the archives, a utility easement snaking through the entire valley. Legal access to roads, power, water, paths no HOA could block. Then came the safety meeting Karen hosted, claiming my vineyard caused drunk driving and fire hazards. The sign-in sheet looked like it had been filled out by one person with 3 pens. I sat in back, quiet, while she painted me as a menace to suburban peace. Her voice had a quiver I recognized from depositions, a person pushing harder because the ground beneath them is cracking. Meanwhile, a thick envelope landed in my mailbox. Cease and desist on fancy letterhead from Hartwell and Morrison. No relation to my buddy Jake. A laundry list of supposed violations: noise, traffic, inappropriate commercial activity. They gave me 72 hours to shut down or face a suit. Classic intimidation. Problem: my savings were thin. You can't hire white shoe counsel on a farmer's budget. One drawn-out fight could force me to sell the very result Karen wanted. But I didn't spend 15 years for nothing. I'd seen this playbook in Connecticut, in the Central Valley. In places where farmland meets fresh pavement, developers lean on the HOA. The HOA leans on the farmer. The pressure adjusts the price. You blink, and the land is gone. I went to the courthouse again and dug deeper. The archives smelled like dust and old ink. By flashlight, I found a misfiled folder from 1987, the state's historic agricultural district designation for Solstice Valley. Not a ribbon-cutting press release. A real designation with legal teeth. It required environmental impact studies for any development within 2 miles of heritage vineyards. 2 miles. You could stand on my hill and see nearly every house Karen's husband had built sitting inside that circle. No impact studies were filed. None. Not one. That meant the permits were, let's say, questionable. Buyers thought they owned compliant homes. They might actually own stylish violations. Back on the farm, the harassment switched from snide to nasty. My irrigation lines were sliced clean. Deliberate cuts that wasted thousands of gallons. Brides got anonymous calls claiming my wine was contaminated, 3 weddings canceled. Fake reviews sprouted online like weeds. Food poisoning. Toxic wine. Unsafe property. I mean, creative writing was never our problem here. So I documented everything. Security cameras, incident logs, email threads. Jake Morrison, the environmental attorney I went to law school with, filed for a temporary restraining order against any HOA interference with agricultural operations. 18 pages. It read like a heavy door slamming shut. We built a team. Jake handled legal strikes. Dr. Sarah Bennett, from the State University soil scientist. Sharp mind. Kinder heart began studying the runoff. The grading. The septic systems spooling out under those cul-de-sacs. What they did here, she said at my kitchen table. Placing soil cores like evidence. Violates half a dozen protections. The groundwater doesn't care about property lines. Father Miguel, a local pastor and a tireless organizer, rallied farm families who'd been pressured quietly for years. Stories poured in surprise code inspections after refusing to sell. Sudden appraisals that somehow slashed land values. Anonymous complaints that mirrored one another, word for word. Patterns. Patterns prosecutors love. By the time the local paper sniffed a story, my table looked like a war map. Surveys, deeds, easements, photos, sworn statements. Ethel, the courthouse clerk, who's been there longer than most judges, started phoning me when certain files moved. Honey, she'd whisper. A man in a nice suit just pulled records for 3 more farms. You didn't hear it from me. Karen doubled down online. Her posts went from polished to frantic. 20 a day, sometimes spinning tales about my taxes, my divorce, my business, It wasn't a campaign anymore. It was a spiral. Then Preston himself showed up, fog curling around his ankles like a warning. "Mark," he said, fake chipper, clutching a sleek briefcase. "I've got a solution. $4 million. Cash. We close in 48 hours. Everyone walks away happy." He was sweating before I even spoke. "Preston," I said, "I wouldn't sell this dirt if you offered $10 million and a seat on your board." He dropped the smile. "You have no idea who you're up against." Actually, I did. And the small microphone under my shirt did, too. Agent Rodriguez, the county inspector who'd been so thorough, federal. The Bureau had taken interest when our paper trail started to look like wire fraud and mail fraud, dressed up in khaki slacks. Here's the thing about bullies. With money they're loud, until someone louder shows a badge. The state attorney general opened an inquiry. The feds asked for my files. Jake prepared injunctions to freeze construction. Dr. Bennett prepped visuals that took complicated environmental law and painted it a color anyone could see: red for violations, blue for waterways, brown for erosion. Father Miguel gathered testimonies in 3 languages, from workers pushed to the edge by sudden redevelopment. Inside the HOA, cracks widened. 3 board members resigned, citing ethical concerns. Home sales slowed. Suppliers started demanding cash from Preston's crew. The local bank, spooked by whispers from regulators, tightened terms like a noose. Karen tried one more parade, a community meditation night. Mediation night to heal divisions. Jake signed us up, behind the scenes. He called Channel 7. "You'll want a camera on this," he told the producer. "Bring extra batteries." The auditorium filled like a courtroom. Folding chairs groaned. The air smelled like coffee, fear, and industrial carpet glue. Karen glided in, smile lacquered on. Preston flanked by 2 lawyers, their briefcases shiny enough to use as mirrors. The mediator, a retired judge, opened the session. Karen went first. Voice sweet with poison. "We welcome agriculture, but not at the expense of safety," she said, gesturing toward a slide about traffic and noise. She waved a petition as if it were scripture. "Rules exist for a reason." Preston offered fair market value for my land, all while lamenting unfortunate misunderstandings. It was theater, Broadway, but with cul-de-sacs. Then it was my turn. I stood slowly, the file in my hands thick as a brick. "Thank you for your patience," I said, calm as a lake. "I've learned a lot about our valley this year. Let's learn together." I started with the old land grant language, 19th century words that still carried weight. I explained our perpetual farming rights. I laid out the 1987 heritage designation and the requirement, non-optional, that developments within 2 miles complete environmental impact studies. I showed maps. Dr. Bennett rolled out charts: septic overflows, graded slopes that bled after storms, silty creeks that used to run clear. Then I turned a page. "Here are the filings that do not exist," I said. "Impact studies that were never completed. Permits issued without the legally required groundwork. Sales closed with disclosures missing, or, in some cases, contradicted by internal emails." Murmurs rippled across the room. The cameras hummed. And here's the part that breaks my heart. I said. Softer. Families who bought here did nothing wrong. They were sold a dream on paperwork that well doesn't hold water. Karen tried to laugh. It came out like a cough. This is fear-mongering. It's evidence, I said, and I nodded toward the doors at the back. Agent Rodriguez and 2 marshals stepped in. Badges, bright. The room went near silent, except for the sound of Karen's breath catching and someone's coffee cup tapping against a chair leg. The agents moved toward Preston. One of his lawyers began reciting case law as if words could stop handcuffs. Mrs. Hartwell, I added gently. The officers you brought to my vines at sunrise, they're here tonight for something a bit more serious. The click of steel echoed like a gavel. Cameras flashed. Karen froze. The certainty draining from her face like color from a painting left in the sun. She began insisting I was a liar, that this was all a setup. But in a room full of neighbors, some who remembered what this valley smelled like before asphalt, her voice couldn't drown out the obvious. 6 months later, I sat on the courthouse steps with a paper cup of coffee and watched the door open. Preston's sentence was measured in years. The judge called his scheme a systematic exploitation of working families and land stewards. Karen got time in a minimum security facility, and when she walked out, no HOA to rule. The homeowners dissolved it themselves, deciding they preferred potlucks to power trips. But justice wasn't the only thing that changed. The state refreshed Solstice Valley's protected status with more teeth than a junkyard dog. No more fast-tracked rezones. No more midnight permit magic. The county partnered with universities to monitor soil and water. Dr. Bennett led the team. She moved into my farmhouse. Her microscope on the kitchen counter next to the fruit bowl. Barley adopted her on day 1. Sprawled across her boots like a furry doorstop. We rescued a second dog, Justice, who patrols the rows like he owns the place. Business boomed, not because of scandal, but because people are hungry for the real thing. Journalists covered the story. Our wines rebranded as Justice Valley found shelves I never dreamed about. The Harvest Festival grew into a county-wide event. Smoke from barbecue drifted across hay bales. Kids learned that tomatoes come from vines, not plastic clamshells. We built community gardens near the creek. And sorry, I'm getting sappy. Watched grandparents show grandkids how to turn dirt with a spade. The bulldozers returned, but this time to undo the damage. A court order condemned a swath of those flashy houses built on legally shaky ground. It hurt to watch families pack. None of this was their fault, but the settlements were real. And the land became a wild corridor again. Deer cut through at dawn. The creek ran clearer after the first winter. The valley felt like itself. We started a farmers' alliance that meets in my barn on Thursdays. Coffee. Donuts. Laughter that bounces off the rafters. We swap notes on pests. Share tools. Read contracts out loud so nobody signs a wolf in sheep's clothing. Father Miguel shows up with extra chairs and a list of people who need a hand. Ethel's writing a book, filing cabinets and felons. I told her the title alone deserves a prize. Calls started coming from other states. Folks in Oregon, in Texas, in Vermont, people with dirt under their nails and HOAs in their hair, asking how we did it. We don't have a magic trick. We have documents, neighbors, and stubborn hope. We tell them, know your rights. Write everything down. And don't fight alone. One evening, golden light poured down the rows like honey. Dr. Bennett Sarah was labeling vials. Hair messy. Eyes bright. Barley and Justice chased a moth and missed. skidding sideways. I leaned on a post and felt this quiet, grateful weight in my chest. The best revenge is not just winning. It's making the place better than you found it. You know, there's something I gotta say out loud for anyone stuck under an HOA that forgot what neighbor means. These boards, well, some of them count on you not knowing the law. They count on you being too tired to push back, or too broke to hire counsel, or too polite to make noise. They think paperwork is a weapon only they can wield. But a deed written in 1962 still matters. A designation filed in 1987 still matters. A handshake from a farmer who remembers which ditch floods in spring still matters. So does a teacher standing up in a folding chair. And a clerk who remembers where the bodies, the documents are buried. Karen wanted me gone because my vines didn't fit her brochure. She used rules like a cudgel. She turned neighbors into an audience. She thought fear would do the rest. What beat her wasn't my law degree, though. That sure helped. It was people. Ordinary. Imperfect. Stubborn people who showed up. A scientist who loves soil. A pastor who believes in land and labor. A clerk with a memory like a steel trap. A valley that refused to forget where it came from. If your HOA is pulling the same stunts, fines for normal life, threats wrapped in letterhead, whispers about property values that sound a lot like sell to us cheap, hear me, you ain't alone. Document. Organize. Ask for help. And when the time comes, speak so clearly that even a camera in the back row hears you. So, yeah, imagine paying dues for harmony, only to be told you can't farm your own dirt. Imagine cops walking your lane at sunrise because a neighbor with a clipboard decided your family's legacy was inconvenient. Then, imagine the same neighbor watching federal agents cross a carpeted floor to handcuff the person who taught her every bad habit. What would you do in my boots? Anyone else had an HOA? Try this on you. Drop your story in the comments. Tell me where you're listening from. And if you've got a friend who needs this, share it. Knowledge is power. Shared knowledge, that's a revolution, small, local, and strong enough to turn back a tide. Because when good people fight back with facts, with law, with each other, the bullies don't just lose, they fade. And the vineyard, our vineyards, our gardens, our porches and creeks and barns, well, they keep doing what they've always done. They outlast.